I'm very happy now to introduce our first contributor, Helena Doudová. She is curator of the architecture collection of the National Gallery in Prague, as I said already, and she's editor of the final publication of the Shared City Atlas, which was recently published, a big project also done by the Goethe Institute in Prague, a EU project about shared cities in Central and Central Europe. Actually, you don't like the term Eastern Europe. But that's the Goethe Institute called it like that, but it's actually Central Europe. You're very true. It's Central Europe. We are Central Europe also here in Germany. She gained a curatorial and museum experience as a research and curatorial fellow of the International Museum Program in the German Museum of Books and Writing in Leipzig. Did a very successful exhibition about Otto Neurath and Fritz Kahn. Thank you. And in cooperation with the University of Erfurt and the German Federal Cultural Foundation. She was fellow of the Robert Bosch Stiftung at the Architecture Museum of the TU Munich at the Pinakothek der Moderne, and also an intern of the German Architecture Center, the DATZ here in Berlin. And she initiated and curated, among others, the exhibition Baugruppe ist super in Prague. And as said, the infographics exhibition Fritz Kahn and Otto Neurath in Leipzig, and is a PhD candidate at the University of Zurich. And your Dr. Vater is, I'm not allowed to say that, but he's also a famous person. So, beside that, she was awarded, of course, by many, many scholarships, and we're very, very happy to have her here and listen to a lecture about the National Gallery in Prague, which is also our bridge to the 2 days event, because the first event, Funktionalism 1, was taking place in the National Gallery in Prague. So Helena, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. I'm really pleased to speak here with this on this occasion, because as Robert was saying, like with this Bauhaus here, we were kind of also asking, why is all modernism Bauhaus? Like, being the Bauhaus, it was actually not a very powerful movement in the interwar period. Like, the major architecture production in Germany was actually modernist, and now with this Bauhaus here, there is becoming like some kind of a dominant perception that all modernism was Bauhaus, and not even in Germany, but also in all Central Europe. So we are kind of trying to question this presentation, which is obviously now 100 years of Bauhaus. And I mean, there have been like this whole 1 year of the Bauhaus. So I mean, just taking this Bauhaus as a label that that excludes a whole great deal of architects, and this is a nice occasion with the Triennale der Moderne to like extend this range of architects also to Erich Mendelssohn in Berlin, Bruno Taut, and Ernst May in Frankfurt, which have not been a topic throughout this whole Bauhaus year. And as for what I followed, there was like this main focus on Walter Gropius and also Hannes Meyer, but except for that, and some of the students, but I mean, except for that, and also the female architects, which was interesting to me, but I think it's good, and I'm really happy that we can speak about also a broader topics here at the Bauhaus Reuse. I would maybe start a little bit with the term functionalism, which is often derived by the term from the term function, Zweck, coined by Louis Sullivan in the plural form false function, and in the German situation by Adolf Bene. For Bene, the function is similar to a kind of tool or a Werkzeug, and the house can therefore be theorized in terms of a tool for living or a machine for living. The function could incorporate also organic aspects, like Sullivan did, such as aerodynamical form, but the main task for architecture was building for the society of a larger society, and one has to compromise the individual solutions and seek the rational, standardized, and typical forms. Other aspects influencing the notion of function in the understanding of the 1920s was utilitarianism, like maximizing the potential of economy, work power, and material, and also the social criteria, in that the rationality should provide a norm for society. Based on the analysis of Adolf Bene, Winfried Nerdinger distinguishes three different types of functionalism. First type is functionalism as art. Nerdinger sees this approach predominantly at the Bauhaus in the slogan Kunst und Technik, eine neue Einheit, whereas for Gropius, quoted by Nerdinger, das Wesen eines Gegenstandes sei sein Zweck, and he continues, das Nützliche ist das Schöne. So what Gropius is here trying to point at is like this traditional unity of the Vitruvius, Venustas, Utilitas, Firmitas, whereas this utilitarianism is most beautiful, is like this underlying layer of the Bauhaus doctrine as it's being portrayed here. The form as such was then aestheticized in a geometrical way for Nerdinger in an art Platonic geometry and primary geometrical forms and colors. At the Bauhaus, Nerdinger observes an establishing of the Bauhaus Stil, in which the function was not analyzed, but rather ontologized. So it was, yeah. Then the Czechoslovak architecture of the 1920s and 1930s worked along the same lines in exploiting the rational and irrational aspects in the artistic process, looking for metaphorical expressions of architecture as oceanic ships, silos, or factories. This was already presented by Simone Hein in her lecture on Tiger in Prague, and on Tiger's Devětsil art group and the magazine Red, which was like a flagship of artistic avant-garde in Czechoslovakia. This tendency the Czech art historian Rostislav Švácha entitled Poetism in Architecture or Pop Architecture. A break towards a kind of more strict analysis was attempted by Karl Teiger in his essay Konstruktivismus a likvidace umění, Constructivism and the Liquidation of Arts in 1925, where he leans more towards the objective analysis of reality, on the constructivist analysis of reality in liquidating the artistic aspect of form and functionalism. So that was the functionalism as art perspective. The second perspective is a scientific perspective. A scientific understanding of architecture was proposed via the analysis and calculations of sun rays, of the movement diagrams in the house, as well as the calculations of the most efficient constructions and the calculations of square meters of housing space per capita. Taken to the extreme, this type of functionalism could be named a kind of aestheticized Fordism or Taylorism, but also constructivism, depending on the position in the political spectrum a particular person or architect is situated in, or in the sense of rational anti-metaphysical philosophy of the Vienna Circle and Otto Neurath. So the constructivism thought, how it existed in Prague, was expressed by Oldřich Starý in the architectural magazine Stavba in 1924 till 1925 in his essay Vývoj ke konstruktivistické architektuře, the development towards the constructivist architecture. Constructivism is for him an inherent part of modern architecture as defined by Otto Wagner in the function as construction, material, and purpose. Other important criteria are hygiene, economy of the proportions, and technical progress. So this understanding is not very much different from the understanding Le Corbusier had with his modern architecture. Architecture should provide a logical order and harmony for life, whereas Starý speaks of a kind of disciplining of society to achieve the modern civilization progress on a larger scale. So that's something that functionalism has been also like this idealistic sort of this idea of modernist progress and a better society, and then subsequent critique in the later times. Stay was also a member of the selection committee for the Trade Fair Palace in Prague. You see on the picture, which will be a subject of my further lecture. The images of the essay of study accompanying his text are those of industrial halls by Auguste Perret in Monterre with the upper lighting sheds from 1921, or the painting studio also by Perret in Paris with a single round roof and a concrete steel structure. So this scientific understanding of architecture was very much influenced by efficiency and sort of austerity and really some effectivity in this like form follows function slogan, and it was also, it's not a coincidence that this architecture was also promoted by Hannes Meyer, who was also of the opinion that architecture should be more like a scientific discipline. The third notion of function is connected to a sociological or social function of architecture, which was especially strong among the interwar avant-garde. The Marxist analysis of society was supported by the scientific elaboration of the different social classes, the working class, the middle class, and the bourgeois class. This was prominently portrayed in the sociological fragments of housing by BHROX, and in the text, the minimal flat and the collective house by Karl Teige, where they analyze these different classes and these different potentials of the society. And then Teige comes to conceives a completely new vision of the classless society with the collective amenities, with people living in single cells, and a completely new restructuring of the family where the children were brought up collectively, completely apart from their parents. Teige also conceived, was also lecturing at the Bauhaus on sociology, and his lecture was published in 1930 under the title Towards a Sociology of Architecture. So we heard already from Simone Hein that Teige was invited by Hannes Meyer, and he was on one hand promoting like some kind of a lyrical vision of architecture, and on the other hand he was also speaking about this social and societal analysis. Now coming to my actual subject, I've been in the gallery not even a year, so this has been like a learning about the space where I'm working at in this trade fair palace. It was built by the architects Oldrich Teil and Josef Fuchs between 1924 and 1928. It was the largest functionalist building of its time, and this iconic building was also a main presentation fair palace of the young Czechoslovak Republic, where one would stage the sample products of machinery, commerce, and design for sale on an international level. The company Pražské vzorkové veletrhy, Prague Trade Fairs, was founded by the government decree in 1920, and also the construction of the monumental building had to be backed by the government because it was so huge. The palace was opened for the 10th anniversary of the young Republic and was demonstrated the economic power of Czechoslovakia. So here you see some competition entries. The competition actually initially asked for Fair Trade City as a large multifunctional complex of buildings of 19,000 square meters of exhibition floors, hotels, offices, etc. The models were the Plan Voisin for Paris by Le Corbusier, or the Ludwig Hilbersheimer's plan for the city in Berlin, Friedrichstadt, from 1928. So here you see that this, on the lower left, that's the Trade Fair Palace, and there was one more symmetric building replicated, and then there are further buildings with hotels and banks and offices. So that was the industrial city, or cité industrielle. As well, this was more multifunctional than Garnier, but it was yeah. This is the competition entry of Oldřich Teil and Josef Fuchs. The architects proposed a clear logical layout based on a constructional unity on the principle of repeated units, reinforced concrete ceiling squares resting on 4 pillars, economical design, and a very austere expression, which you can see in the small hall, but this austere expression you can also see in these drawings by Bohuslav Fuchs. There is absolutely no decoration on the walls. Yeah, and then here you see the staircase. And actually the final building will look quite austere, as was the idea of the architects. However, this is the construction site. Yeah, so you can see that the architects were kind of inspired by the factories, yeah, this is the finished building. This is the interiors of the house by a Czech photographer, famous photographer Josef Sudek, where you can really see that the building is lacking any detailing, actually, and this austerity was kind of in collision with the commissioner of this fair trade palace, because he actually imagined something more affluent, more rich than these utilitarian factory buildings that the Paris did, or Teil and Fuchs, or that I would say personally it stood very much close to the expression of scientific functionalism that Oldřich study was promoting, and Winfried Nerdinger named in their understanding on functionalism. So basically, the two viewpoints merged on the basis of pragmatic calculation and usability of spaces for fair trade businesses. For the commissioner, this small hall was actually more representative. It was clad with red marble and had a lot of light and more valuable materials like the floor tiles. Then there is this main hall, which I said it looks like a factory, and actually it does, because in this main hall there were usually the machine sample for sale, presented for sale. And in addition, there were richly furnished French restaurants and cafes, a cinema, a post office, and many other amenities. These are the small shops or showrooms for the small fair trade offices one could actually rent. So the basic module of the building was so practical and only like divided with glass that you could really like quite easily rent out the whole building to this like fair trade commerce. Here you see that the floor was terracotta with blue railings and blue window frames. Here is the plan of the building with the big hall and the small hall, and in all of these floors there were exhibition showrooms. So it was a very rational building, and the same plan repeated 5 times above each other. Here you see the cross section with the main hall in the middle. Yeah. Oh god. And then the life of the palace was quite spectacular, with over 500,000 visitors for the fairs in 1929. Le Corbusier was also known to visit the building shortly after it was opened, where he noted that he learned a lot from the building, especially the big scale the functionalist buildings could have for his own practice. He had some comments on the composition of the palace, on the square windows, which he, in spite of his critique, then later employed in his projects as well. As I said, the house was a multi-functional mixed-use house with cinema, telephone, shopping, post office, restaurants, and other amenities, and was most lively throughout the regular trade fairs. During the Second World War, the palace became a repository of the confiscated Jewish property and the offices of the Treuhandsteller and the SS. After the World War II, the bourgeois practice of fair trades was limited and stopped in 1959. The building was occupied by governmental foreign trade offices, and in 1958, parts of the palace became heritage protected, the facade and the composition of the great and the small halls. Well, then in 1974, like a catastrophe for the existence of the house broke out on the 5th floor and quickly spread throughout the long corridors with office material and paper and furniture that quickly caught fire, and the event was categorized as a firestorm, and the liquidation of the fire lasted for 7 days. The palace was completely ruined. The different thoughts circulated about its demolition. Only in 1976 it was proclaimed a built heritage as a complex. Here you see the facade and the internal small hall. So yeah, and this is this big hall. So there were like thoughts circulating. It's interesting that it's about the same time as the Bauhaus Dessau building was renovated in East Germany, and also the Bauhaus archive was opened in 1978. So maybe there is like a wave of reappreciation of functionalist architecture or modernist architecture during that time, because I mean this ruined house, it would have been also possible that they tore it down and then not decided for the reconstruction. There were so this is like some document on the heritage protection of the palace, and everyone started to think about what it should be reused for. There were ideas for university, which you see here, with the different lecture halls. Then it was an idea for city hall, for political offices, and only in 1978 it was decided to devote the palace to the National Gallery for modern and contemporary arts collection. This is a longitudinal cut. The renovation lasted from, 1982 until 1995. This was like due to the massive damage of the house, but also due to the very slow process in the socialist countries you could work with. The reconstruction was performed by Stavoprojekt Liberec, SIAL office, by Miroslav Masák, Tomáš Bezpalec, Karol Hubáček, Václav Králíček, Karol Novotný, Josef Patrný, and Emil Přikryl. The construction of the palace was retained fully, though the fire revealed that the built pillars of the palace were more slender than designed initially in the 1920s. All pillars had to be supported with an envelope, which slightly changed the aesthetics of the building. New glass walls were introduced as a fire regulation. As well, different proposals for uniting the exhibition floors and raising the ceiling of the big hall were formulated. So, like for exhibition, the whole gallery, there is this big hall in the center, and obviously it's not working so well, and many architects also nowadays they propose to raise the ceiling to up to the 4th floor, and there were also like different proposals to insert like new volumes into this big hall, and also for exhibition purposes, like this these single floors are relatively low, so there is ongoing discussion to actually unite these different floors, because the house has 7 floors and 2 upper floors, and then it has, I think, 4 or 5 floors below the ground. Yeah, so here you see the outcomes as the palace was reopened in 1995. The proposals to rebuild the palace actually then went in the most sensitive way. The building became even more functionalist than it was at the time. We saw it in the 1920s, because the architects, they redid it in terms of this like more white cube paradigm. Like I was speaking about this marmor cladding and white terracotta floors. So these were, for example, exchanged for white terrazzo floors, and the blue details of railings were actually retained only on the outer facades in the windows frames. This is the big hall, where these the machines would stay. It still has this factory character, and now the monument, some kind of monumental big installations take place there. In addition, yeah. So that was the approach to return to like some kind of this like initial functionalist image of the palace, or even like strengthen the whiteness of the functionalism. The art depository was built of 400,000 square meters and an overall exhibition space of 23,000 square meters. So it became a museum in its size comparable to Victoria and Albert Museum in London, with a space of 25,000 square meters of exhibition spaces, and it is even actually larger than Centre Pompidou, which is some kind of a factory for the arts. So the Centre Pompidou has 70,000 square meters. So these are the corridors which are relatively low for the exhibition of arts. So there is like this idea to connect those different floors. I mean, like the big hall is working quite well, also the small hall, but there is not a proper conservation on these floors. So one has to be really careful about what can be kind of exhibited and how long in this area. And then one is still thinking about how to redo this palace. The palace was up for reconstruction just recently, and the Heritage Office permitted actually quite extensive change of the structure in terms of the floor heights, in terms of the height of the big hall, and the change of the surroundings of the building. So everybody is kind of really curious how would the architectural proposals look like if there were an architectural competition, which was actually about to happen. But due to some political problems in the Czech Republic and the change of the director of the gallery, this whole process was stopped at the moment. So this is the contemporary. It's the 20s and 30s exhibition on the First Republic from the collection of the National Gallery. Which includes also not only Czech art, but also a lot of French arts and French modernist arts, and also German art, because actually the National Gallery was like half German, or the collection includes a lot of German works, because as you may know, in the First Republic there was a minority of German minority of 3 million people in this 10 million state. So yeah. Well, and the last thing I would show is a video we did on the exhibition palace, and that will be like a short review of what I was saying.
Myšlenka. Pražské veletrhy Václava Boháče. Václavova vize byla nekompromisní. Mělo-li se začít s výstavbou moderního obchodního města, muselo mít všechny atributy současného velkoobchodu. Kanceláře, kino, restaurace. Funkcionalistický návrh Oldřicha Tyla a Josefa Fuchse v soutěži zvítězil. Navrhli světlo pronikající velkorysými okny a světlíky ve střešní konstrukci. 2 vnitřní prostory. Jeden úzký a vysoký. Druhý rozlehlý a relativně nízký. Muchovy dějiny slovanského národa zde budou působit téměř nepatřičně. Podzim 1928. 500 000 návštěvníků. Le Corbusier si prohlíží palác a pochopí, jak musí vytvářet velké budovy. Místa ve městě s obytnými střechami a vnitřními ulicemi. Přístupné a zalité světlem. Válka. Mými ulicemi pochoduje gestapo. Zabavený židovský majetek plní výstavní koje. Znárodnění. Palác se pro veřejnost v podstatě uzavírá. Přízemí obsazuje tu.
It's the war period and the 1950s where we didn't have the image material to work with. So we basically like animated in 3D the historical photography and created like a narrative that goes throughout the whole history and story.
1976. Palác dnes zapisují na seznam kulturních památek. Má nulovou finanční hodnotu, ale i teď je stělesněním logiky a optimismu první republiky. Společností rezonují návrhy na jeho obnovu. Nemocnice, studentská kolej, československé aerolinie, projektový ústav. Prosinec 1995. Slavnostní otevření. Proudící davy nahradilo moderní a současné umění Národní galerie. Bílá je všude. Na zdech, na podlaze i na zábradlí. Okna jsou teď zrcadlivá. Zvenku už není vidět dovnitř. Zmizely markýzy a náměstí. Přibyly živé ploty a příkop. Tohle je teď moje ulice a moje město. Představte si, že výška stropů už není limitující. Výstavní prostory nejsou nijak členěny. Že je dost místa pro vzdělávací aktivity. Že neexistuje žádná optická bariéra. Před budovou není kamenná hráz. Před budovou je opět veřejný prostor.
So, I think that's all for me. Thank you for your patience. I would also say that we did this video with an animation agency from Prague, Loom on the Moon, and it was co-produced in the National Gallery. Yeah, so I think that's all for me.